Welcome to all of you here to Glendale Community College in our auditorium. I am David Vire, and I proudly serve Glendale Community College as its Superintendent President. And on behalf of our Board of Trustees, our Faculty Guild represented here tonight, our Academic Senate also represented here tonight, our School Employees Association, the classified staff, and our administrative team, we at Glendale Community College are pleased to host this very important town hall on college affordability. Thank you, Assemblymember Laura Friedman, for sponsoring the town hall and the leadership you are showing in Sacramento on behalf of our region on this and so many very important issues to help strengthen our region and our local areas to make these the places that we want to live and to improve our state. Your focused attention and your thoughtful analysis on bills and on issues we need to address is truly appreciated. And these town hall efforts clearly are your way of reaching out and learning from your constituents as well. It is fitting that this event is at Glendale Community College, one of 113 community colleges in the state. Our California community colleges are focused on providing affordable, high-quality, accessible education where students can successfully move towards accomplishing their educational goals of transfer to a university or a well-paying job or career, getting their basic skills to assure they can make progress through college-level courses, and or receiving basic skills, gaining English as second language for many of the immigrants and those who come to our region. Recently, Glendale Community College was identified as the 4th highest upward mobility college in the country. That's universities and community colleges. That is a project of the Equal Opportunity Project, and the mobility rate identifies those who start in the lower quintile in terms of income and their movement to being ultimately in the highest level of the income. And so that says a lot about what we in community colleges and here at Glendale are about. Helping people move forward to achieve their success, moving up the economic ladder, becoming better citizens, connecting to the social and economic welfare of the region. That's what we're about, and that's what tonight is about, and that's why we care about assuring that a college education is affordable and accessible to all who want to take advantage of it. The Urban Institute has noted that in today's economy, its competitive economy, nothing is more important than getting a college education. California state and local policy leaders have worked to keep higher education costs low. Been doing that for a number of years, and you're going to learn more about that from our panelists. Community college tuition rates have remained at $46 per unit for a number of years. And here at Glendale Community College, and it's not dissimilar with other community colleges, we have 14,110 of our 20,000 students who receive a state waiver of student fees. Over $10 million of student fees are waived, covered by the state of California for our students. 2,500 students receive close to $2.5 million from various Cal Grant programs. And approximately 8,000 Glendale Community College students have received over $25 million in various federal financial aid and support programs annually. But in spite of these efforts, very significant efforts, the questions remain. What does college affordability mean? What does it really look like? Are we doing enough to make college affordable to our citizens? What does the Trump federal budget say about the value of affordable higher education, and what kind of effect might it have if passed as presented? So tonight we are going to turn to our panelists who will introduce themselves and share their background and their purpose in being here tonight and their work on behalf of college affordability, followed by our sponsor and moderator, Assemblymember Laura Friedman, who will engage the panel in seeking answers to these important questions, and then finish with an opportunity for members of the audience to ask Assemblymember Friedman and the members of the panel questions. So, panel members, we'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank you, Doctor, and the staff at GCC for hosting us here. This is certainly one of the gems of this area, and it's an incredible asset for the entire community. And for me personally, I'll just tell you that my husband, in his 40s, decided to change careers. And he went to UCLA and got a degree in landscape architecture, but he took all of his core coursework here at GCC. And he was able to save a tremendous amount of money. In fact, I don't think it would have been affordable for him to have done all of his work at UCLA, not to mention that it was an hour drive each direction, and we live here in Glendale, so it was incredible for him and really made his change of career and his new career and his new business possible. I took French here. We won't talk about that. It wasn't as successful for me, but that's about me, not about the courses. Yeah, but it's really an incredible asset for the community. We get a lot of questions about college affordability, and certainly you hear about it in the media about people graduating from college, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 in debt. And even with community colleges being much more affordable than a private university, there are still so many pressures that are on students, because not only do they have to pay for their courses, we were talking in the hallway about also having to maybe pay for rent and what that does. And then when you're in school, you're not working and earning an income, and how difficult that is. And I'm going to let the panelists in a minute talk about some of the latest research about the economic situation that a lot of our students are in, and then we'll talk about some solutions as well. Before I introduce the panel, I did want to take a minute to just tell you a little bit about what's been happening just in the last couple of weeks in Sacramento in terms of state funding for higher education. And there's some good news. This higher education has been a priority, and education in general for the Assembly and the legislature in the past couple of years, and we've been able to make some pretty good gains in this last couple of weeks with the budget. So a few weeks ago, we passed the new budget, the 2017-18 state budget, and I'm proud to say that the Assembly Democrats really made college affordability one of their top priorities. We included a total of $13.4 billion in state dollars for higher education. That money is going to help expand capacity at our colleges and universities, invest in career pathways, and provide stronger financial aid to thousands of our students. We protected the middle-class scholarship, which was something that Governor Brown had put on the chopping block this year. That can provide up to $5,000 a year for a UC student and $2,300 a year for a CSU student. In this district alone, we've already had over 800 students benefit from the scholarship since it launched 5 years ago. We also increased our support for community college students. If you're a full-time student, you could be eligible for $3,000 in financial aid. And overall, we increased Cal Grant funding by just over $33 million. That includes additional funding for tuition assistance for both UC and CSU students and for new students attending private colleges and universities. We've almost doubled our Cal Grant award amounts to cover the cost of books and supplies for community college students, another additional cost that people don't always think about when they think about college affordability. And I just want to mention 3 bills that are right now going through the legislature. And there's good news for one of them and bad news for 2. And the reason I'm telling you even about the bad news bills is because people often call our office and they say, I'm concerned about this or I'm concerned about that, and how can I get involved? And I wanted to present the bills to you just to tell you that if I tell you and you're upset that some of these bills failed, the next cycle around, pay attention to the bills that involve education. And you can sort them by category, I believe, on the state website. And then if there are ones that you think are particularly good bills, advocate for them. Call your legislator. Call other people's legislator. Put it up on social media. Get your friends to call. Because when nobody calls about these bills, it's really easy for special interest groups to kill them, or for things to happen along the way. So the one that upset me this week, and this just happened on Thursday, was about SB 16, the wage garnishment restrictions that was introduced by Senator Wachowski. It had passed on the Senate side and then came over to the Assembly. And what this bill would have done was try to relieve the pressure on some of the students that have student loan debt. So in America, over 40 million Americans have student loan debt. In fact, it outpaces credit card debt as the leading source of debt for most families. Did you know that? I didn't know that. When borrowing for, when income post-graduation doesn't keep pace with the repayment schedule, struggling borrowers can end up having their wages garnished. If you happen to have a government-backed loan, there's a cap at 15% of your earnings. So they can't take any more than 15% of your earnings to pay for the student loans. But if you have a private loan, those banks can take up to 25% of your income every single month to pay for your debt. What this bill would have done was create parity and say that the private banks couldn't charge more than that couldn't garnish more than that 15%, just like the government does. Well, guess who weighed in? The banks weighed in. And there weren't enough people on the other side calling the assembly members, so this bill failed. In fact, it didn't get past 38 votes, I believe, on the floor of the assembly. AB 19, enrollment waiver fee, by Santiago, Chu, and McCarty. What this bill does is today community college district governing boards are required to charge students an enrollment fee of $46 per unit per semester. With AB 19, all first-time community college students who enroll in 12 or more semester units would have that fee waived. This is a great way to help make community college more affordable, and I'm proud that I voted for it on the assembly floor. Right now, it did get out of the assembly, it did pass, and now it's on the Senate side. If this interests you, if you think it's a good idea, call the senators and let them know that. And AB 379, which was called the California Kickstart My Future Loan Forgiveness Program by Gomez, would have established a program for recent college graduates. Right now, repayment of student loan debt typically begins 6 months after graduation, which can catch up to you pretty quickly. 6 months really is not a very long time. So if you're trying to get a career going, in a new career, find a job, balance housing costs, that can be really difficult. So what this would have done was that it would have forgiven that student loan debt for graduates for the first 2 years out of college. So you'd be able to get your life together, get a new job, start your career, get your housing settled before you were asked to start repaying those loans. Unfortunately, this bill was held in the Appropriations Committee earlier this year, and being held in appropriation pretty much means for a bill. So that's what's happening right now in Sacramento, and now I'm going to turn to our panelists who are experts in this field, unlike myself, and I'm sure you will have a lot that you want to hear from them. And then we will be taking questions, so if you have questions at any point, you can raise your hand, and we have people that will come around and give you a note card. First, at the end of the table, we have Ryan Corner, who's the Vice Chancellor of Education Programs and Institutional Effectiveness for LACCD. He's let's see, the district is comprised of 9 community colleges serving nearly 250,000 students a year. In his position, Dr. Corner oversees the district functions related to curriculum development, academic and student support services, research planning, accreditation, and information technology. His current projects include the launch of the LA College Promise, the development of the district strategic plan, and the partnership with the CSU system to develop a reverse transfer pilot. Dr. Corner received his MSW from USC in 2006 and his ED in 2010. Next to him is Sarah Hernandez, founder of HYPE, H-Y-P-E, HYPE. Sarah Hernandez is a lawyer, former LAUSD teacher, and founder of Helping Young People Excel, a nonprofit that helps low-income students across LA attain exceptional educational opportunities in high school and beyond. As an English and history teacher at Johnny Cochran Middle School in South LA, Sarah helped 3 of her students win full scholarships to leading local high schools. Her organization, HYPE, identifies low-income students throughout Los Angeles and provides them with exceptional educational opportunity and resources throughout their high school years. HYPE has recently merged with Young Eisner Scholars, which has the acronym YES, good for them, to expand its impact to New York, Chicago, and Appalachia. HYPE alumni have been accepted to some of the most prestigious universities across the United States. Called one of LA's most fascinating people by LA Weekly, Sarah is a recipient of the Albert Rodriguez Civic Legacy Award and has been named New Leaders Council Hero and Assembly District 53 Democrat of the Year. She continues to be a leading millennial voice in LA Democratic politics and leads her community in creating solutions to local problems and challenges. And it's not on here, but she recently ran for Congress, and you've got to really admire someone for doing that. So good job. Yes. Congratulations. John McDowell, who is next to me, is the Director of Government Relations for the LA Faculty Guild. He is a strong advocate for college affordability, and I will tell you, having met a lot of advocates, there is no stronger advocate for college affordability than John. He advocates for student financial aid, equal access for quality college education for everyone. Over his careers, he served as the past president and 15-year member of the Board of Governors of the statewide Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. Founded and served as the director of the Labor Center at Trade Tech, offering both associate degrees and certificates in labor studies and community planning, educating over 1,200 students a year. provided leadership at both the LA District and Tech Trade College on budget committees, the College Council, and serving on the College Foundation Board, which provides $300,000 a year in scholarships, and served 4 years on the California Student Aid Commission, which provides $2 billion a year in student financial aid. Elected chairman of the board in 2013 through 15 when CSAC instituted the middle class scholarships in the DREAM Act. He earned his master's degree in CSU in Sacramento, and John and his wife Pat are longtime residents of Silver Lake, where their two daughters grew up, so he is local. So before I start with the questions, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to really tell you anything that they want to tell you up front. If they want to talk about their programs, or if they want to talk about what their schools offer, that's perfectly fine. If they want to just jump into the issue and talk about affordability or give advice, that's fine too. It's your floor for 3 to 5 minutes each, and then we'll turn to questions from myself and from the audience. We'll start with John.
All right, I'll lead off. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much for putting this forum on for those of you who are here, and thank you for being here, and thank you, President Vire, for hosting this important forum tonight. I'm going to start off by talking about when I was in high school. Clark Kerr, who was the president of the University of California, put together a task force to study what California needed to do going forward into the future. This is 1959. And what they saw, he put together a huge team of educators and people who understood issues that California was facing. The biggest issue we were facing in higher education is the baby boomers were coming down the pike, and they would soon be going to college. And we didn't have the facilities to educate all the baby boomers. So they put together something called the Master Plan for Higher Education. How many of you have heard of that master plan? And it did many things, which I'm not going to touch on. I'm going to only touch on one factor, and that was it stated that in California, any Californian should be able to go to college for free with no tuition, no fees. And I don't think you'll find many people like myself who literally attended all three systems of higher education, UC Berkeley, Sac State, Cal State LA, 2 community colleges for free.
Wow.
And I very much appreciated the education I got. Somewhere along the line, the attitude kind of was put forward that if people paid some tuition, paid fees, had skin in the game, an expression which I hate, that somehow they would appreciate their education more than I did, and that's just simply bunk. It's not true. I appreciated it. And by the way, it wasn't free. There was no tuition, but there was no free college education. I had rent, I had food to pay for, transportation, fees, books, tools, materials, you name it. And for older students who have children, you're talking about childcare as well and other expenses of raising kids. So that was my experience. And so because of that, and by the way, throughout my career as a student, I was working, I was washing dishes and bussing tables and baking pizza, selling clothing at J.C. Penney's, you name it. Actually, the job that was the best for me was working in a cannery, Libby's Cannery in Sacramento, getting union scale, working a 12-hour shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., which helped me afford to go to college. So it wasn't free, but there wasn't any charge in terms of fees. Because of my experience, I believe that we should return to that reality and eliminate all fees at higher education in public institutions. And I fought for that throughout my life. I'll just tell you a few of the things that I did. In 1967, when the new governor came in and proposed tuition at the CSU system, about 10,000 of us massed on the steps of the Capitol and said no tuition in the CSU system. And we pushed back and we stopped it at that time. Then much later on in my career in 2003, when Governor Davis proposed deep cuts in community colleges and raising the fees from $11 to $18, we pushed back again, showed up at the steps of the Capitol, lobbied as much as we could to try to push back. We minimized the cuts in the budget for community colleges, but the fees went up. They went up to from 11 to 18, then to 26, now to 46, and we've been pushing back all along. And then something else that happened that you probably don't even remember, but I think that President Vire would, because we were on a team together to put an initiative on the ballot, Prop 92, to cap fees so that they wouldn't raise any more than $1 a year, and to increase funding somewhat for growth in community colleges. Unfortunately, 2008 was a bad year to put an initiative on the ballot. The economy was going to hell, and the cuts were occurring right and left, and we didn't identify a source of funding, so that was defeated. And then the last thing I want to touch on with my career is in 2011, well, let me just go back one step and say that when I was the president of FAC, we fought like, this is a statewide association for faculty and community colleges. We fought to push back on fees, to get more funding for community colleges, to do more to help students. And in 2011, there was a vacancy on the Student Aid Commission. And by then, I had realized that even if we were to push back and eliminate fees, that's not enough. We need more financial aid. So when the governor, again, this is Governor Brown, now it's ironic, the master plan was signed by Governor Brown, Pat Brown, and now we have Jerry wanting to cut $300 million out of Cal grants. And John Perez, the speaker at that time, knew that I would not agree to that. I would fight it, and I did. I went on to the Student Aid Commission. We pushed really hard. By the way, the majority of the members of the Student Aid Commission are appointed by the governor. So they were the ones who were courageous to take on the governor who appointed them, whereas my appointer, the speaker, did not want to see $300 million cut from financial aid. So we stopped that. And over these recent years, the amount of money going into financial aid and Cal Grants has risen to almost $2 billion today. And I believe that we need to do much more. We need to eliminate fees completely, and we need to do a lot more around financial aid. And some of the things, as you mentioned earlier, are really good improvements. Expanding the Cal Grant and Cal Grant amounts really means that more people can go to college and college becomes more affordable. So let me just say one more thing about the California Master Plan. When it was passed and signed by the governor, there was a period of time, months after months, where the issue was in the news. It was being debated, it was being discussed. When it was passed and signed by the legislature, it was not a Democratic bill, not a Republican bill. It was completely bipartisan, and everybody in California at that time understood that this is a good policy, this is a good thing to do, because not only the students like myself who were able to take advantage of that, and by the way, I don't think I would be here tonight had it not been for the California Master Plan, but it fueled the economy grew, and everybody benefited. Really, people were better off all the way around the state, much like what happened when the GI Bill came in, and the veterans from World War II and the Korean War were able to go to college, paid for by the government. They did better in their lives, they earned more money, they paid more taxes, we all benefited. So I think there's a strong support and rationale for improving financial aid, eliminating fees, finding more ways to help students and make college more affordable. That's what I've devoted my career to. My career's not quite over, but today is the day that I am actually retiring. No, wait, I'm retired. As of 5 o'clock, I don't work for LA Community College District anymore, so I don't have to answer to Ryan, to Dr. Corner. 39 years, and it was time. But I'll still be around doing some advocating for the same things I've always advocated for throughout my career.
That's great. I can't help but just chime in just to echo the importance of education to the economy. Just to give you a little anecdote, a few months ago I was in Silicon Valley. I'm on the Tech Caucus in Sacramento, and I went to Silicon Valley and we were talking to all the big tech companies, and we were saying, well, what, you stay in California, what's going to make you leave, and is it the environmental regulations? No. Is it the taxes? No. The thing that they're really afraid of and what's making them leave and bring people in is they can't get enough skilled workers. They can't get enough engineers, people who can write code, people who know computers to do the jobs that they have. I think the statistic is something we're going to be 1 million college degrees short in California in the next few years. 1 million. So there's a huge economic imperative for us to make sure that we have the highest educated population that we can possibly have, not just because it's good for them, but because our economy in California really depends on it. So with that, I'll move to Sarah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me here today, Assemblymember Friedman. And, college affordability is something that I'm really passionate about because, like everybody, I have a personal experience with education, and I've revolved a lot of the work that I've done throughout my professional career around providing educational opportunity to people who need it the most. And the reason why I really care about that is because I grew up in a part of California where going to college was not the norm, it was the exception. And that, coupled with a very stark reality of a lack of resources and opportunities in the community that I grew up in, it really created this very, very stark contrast between the experience that I had when I walked onto a college campus. I went to Duke University in North Carolina, and the life I had been living for the first 18 years of my life. And that had this incredibly, incredibly profound experience for me. You know, the people I met, the lifestyles and the the experiences that they had and the opportunities that they had and the opportunities that I then had now was just something that really, really stuck with me. And just the idea, I spent, I think, a good part of my freshman year in college kind of walking around campus thinking, what would happen if some of my friends from home would have had that experience and that opportunity. And so for me, college wasn't just about academic opportunity. It was really becoming startlingly aware of the fact that there is access and there is opportunity to cultural capital and a culture of power that really links itself up to socioeconomic mobility. So when we talk about that economic ladder of opportunity that I think President Byers just mentioned, that is intrinsically related to educational opportunity or the lack of it. And that is something that is tied to every single issue that we talk about when we talk about how our society has failed our most vulnerable, whether you're talking about the juvenile justice system, whether you're talking about healthcare, all of that really boils back down to education. And so that became evidently clear for me based on my personal experience between high school and college. I decided to come out to Los Angeles after college. I taught in South LA and Watts, and it was probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And I really, really desperately wanted to see my students have that same that same awareness and that same amazing opportunity that I had been able to experience as a young person that went on to college. And so I started a program, and it's still around today. We identify low-income kids all around this city in middle school and then work to get them exceptional educational opportunity in high school and beyond. And we are, I am really proud to say that I've seen many of my students go on to some of the best schools in this country, and it's really the reason why I'm here today, to really talk about how do we do that and how do we make that that really a reality. But the other reason that I'm actually here today is because my theory has changed over the past year, my past decade as an educator and as someone who's run a nonprofit. Because my experience growing up in Central California, a small farm town in Central California, was so different than my college experience, I really focused on that stark contrast as a young teacher. And so, a decade ago, if I had students that came in and talked to me about college, I would tell them, go to the best school that you can get into. Apply, get in, do whatever you have to do. If you have to take out loans, do it, go. It's the experience, it's the education, it's the degree, it's gonna be worth it. I can tell you with enough certainty right now that I was wrong. And maybe I wasn't wrong at the time, but that is definitely not the reality today. I would never advise my students, or I would never maybe frame the issue that way that I framed it a decade ago. Because, the reason why we're here today is because we're talking about college affordability. And college affordability is something that is a tremendous barrier for so many people. And I can't, as an educator, look my students in the eye with good conscience and tell them that they need to invest in their education, knowing that that might mean that they need to saddle themselves with crippling student loan debt for the majority of their lives. I just can't say that anymore. I'm personally one of those 44 million Americans. I have over $170,000 in student loan debt. And that's something that we cannot continue to make the norm for so many young Americans today. And so what I have really done throughout the years of kind of learning what best practices are as an educator and how do we serve vulnerable communities the most is how do we make sure that people have that life-changing educational opportunity, but we make sure that they're doing it in a fiscally responsible way. How do we make sure that we can help students navigate the system so that they can get that amazing college education, but they can do it with little to no loans? And so what I'm here today is what I would like to do is just, impart some of the strategies that we use with HYPE. HYPE is now merged with YES. Great acronym. And just impart some of those strategies about how do you really identify the best experience for you, and how do you make sure that you can finance it and you get the money and the scholarships that you need to make that happen.
Terrific.
Great.
So wow, some amazing experiences. I began my career as a social worker. I really wanted to help people, and I moved into education because I could really tell that you could make a similar impact on those populations on a much more macro level by trying to help through education. I want to speak a little bit to what our fellow panelists have said, especially about that theory change. And that theory change is indicative of what we see across the entire nation, where education is no longer being seen as a public good, but as a private good. And the result of that has been the shift in cost from the state and the federal government to the individual, which saddles people with $170,000 worth of debt. I do believe the average now is over $30,000 for people finishing with a baccalaureate degree. And that has been piggybacked by what John was discussing, which is the amount of financial aid has diminished. When you look at the Pell Grants, when the Pell Grant system started in 1974, a Pell Grant would cover almost 120% of the cost of a public two-year education. 120%. So cover all the tuition, all the fees, and you'd have a little bit of money to make sure that you could cover those costs that people don't talk about, the housing, the transportation, the food. Right now, even with the lower costs of community colleges across the nation, it covers only about 60%. The power of our Pell Grant system has been cut in half at the federal level. And we see that worse with the 4 years. Community colleges have always had a focus on affordability, but the 4 years, both public and private, have had greater tuition impact relative to the Pell Grant. Almost 95% of tuition costs used to be covered by a Pell Grant for public universities. Now it's down to around 30%. The Pell Grants are about $5,000 a year, $5,600 a year. You think about what it costs to go to a Cal State system, which used to be free, and that Pell Grant will only cover about 2/3 of that tuition now and less than half at the UC. Even with the Cal Grant system, which is very generous compared to other state systems, it doesn't cover everything that students need. And believe me, none of us are up here saying that students shouldn't work at all. I for one, did my dishes as well, John. Actually, that was my favorite job, not the cannery, but doing dishes. Because you came in, you did dishes, you knew there were going to be dishes when you were done, and you could just zone out and not worry about your classes for a little while. But we have seen the impact of our financial aid system diminish for students. What hits us even more in the community college system is often the ill advice that students get that they should save their financial aid for the 4 years. I'm sure people have heard that. When you go to a community college, oh, it's only $46 a unit, save it for the 4 years. Well, you know what? We've done studies. And students who just have tuition covered, which is a large percentage of our students through the Board of Governors fee waiver, actually do equal to a little bit less than the general student success rates. But those who have a Pell Grant do better, because the Pell Grant helps provide students with an opportunity to cover their books. A lot of our students don't even buy them. Books can range anywhere now from a cheap book at $80 to a science book that could be $350. I mean, think about that, a book, $350. And if it takes you 2 weeks to earn that amount of money to buy a book, that's 2 weeks that you missed learning in that class. And that's what we see our students facing. Here in our LA Community College District, we serve over 230,000 students. 51% of them are classified as being below the poverty line. And below the poverty line, $46 a unit is still heavy, but that $350 textbook is impossible. John works at a school that has a lot of career technical programs that require students to buy tools. Imagine having to buy a set of tools for $1,500 when you're below the poverty line.
That's only the start.
And that's the start.
I mean, auto mechanic, you need to spend about $4,000 or $5,000. And you need those before you can go to work.
We are all blessed to be in jobs where you don't actually have to bring your computer with you and things like that. It's provided when you get there, but the career technical programs don't often get that. In our district, we give out every year over $275 million in financial aid, which is a lot of money, but I can tell you it's not enough. Recently, we just did a study, and we found that 1 in 5 of our students face homelessness over the course of a year. They're evicted from their house. They don't have a place to stay. They sleep in a car. Recently, our district academic senate president brought a video to our board of trustees of a student who was sleeping in his van. And so when we look at these issues, we need to look at the cost of education, not just as it relates to the actual educational system, but also everything else that students face.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the question portion now, so get your questions in if you have them. So let me just ask, and by the way, don't feel that you each have to answer. If somebody answered it the way that you would have, we can just get more questions in, so that's fine too. So what has led to this crisis, do you think? Is it the lack of interest from the government? What are the forces, the financial forces that have that have caused this increase in tuition and the disproportionate decrease in the financial aid that's available?
Well, let me say that first off, it's really due to a reduced amount of funding coming from the state to all 3 systems of higher ed. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to get you to pay attention. How many of you know what Prop 13 was? Let me see your hands. All right, and probably most of you are paying less taxes on your home than I and myself than before. When Prop 13 was passed by the voters in 1978, the year that I went to work at Trade Tech full-time, there was no thought that was a huge loss to education because Prop 13, property taxes then, basically funded K-12 and community colleges. When that source of income was really basically slashed in half, over the years, that funding has never been replaced. And as a matter of fact, what happened in Prop 13, which most people don't really know about, is instead of local voters deciding how much money to spend for their K-12 or community college, it went to the state of California. The legislature now decides how much each of those systems get for funding. So that occurred, and then times got tough with recessions as they went down. Corporations are paying half the proportion of taxes that they did before. That's occurred over a long period of time. But one of the main reasons, and Dr. Corner knows all about this because our district faces this, we live in an economy that's never going to be anything but a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. Now, what happens? When the economy is up or going up, like now, as you described earlier, the budget looks pretty good for community colleges and K-12, and we're struggling to fill our classes because students are out there working or looking for jobs. Then when the economy dives again, students are going to flock to our colleges, and our budgets are going to be cut. And the UC's budget will be cut, and the CSU. So what happens is, to make up for that lost revenue, you have 2 choices. Offer less program, or raise the tuition or fees. And so what has happened is this slowly but surely fees started going up and going up. Even as recently as 1975 or 80, tuition and fees was fairly low. But through the hard times, they've gone, the fees have gone higher. And then we've talked about this now already. Let me mention it again. This idea that somehow, since an education is a private benefit, so I benefited, so I should pay. Well, I'm going to pay. I'm paying the state of California back with higher taxes because I'm earning more, paying more taxes. And in one of the recessions when things were being cut and I was in Sacramento lobbying, they asked me, well, what's the solution, John? We don't have the money. And I said, well, the best thing you can do is invest in education. because then you'll have a more robust economy later on. And they laughed. I literally got laughed out of some of the offices of the legislators who said, John, you're crazy. We're not going to increase funding for community colleges or K-12. We don't have the money. Well, we have to get the money. Your job is to find that money and put it into education. I give you the challenge.
Does anybody have anything to add to that, or should I move on?
No, I think that was well said.
Yes, very well said. So I'm going to move to some practical questions now, because I'm sure that there are students here, or I've met a few people who are parents who have 17-year-olds who are going to college. So let's move to a few practical questions. What are the most common barriers that students and their families experience when they're trying to navigate the college and financial aid process?
So I think that the barriers are pretty clear to most people in this room, and we really take with hype now. Yes, we take a very structured approach, though, because they're all very important sort of barriers that need to be addressed. One, the question of why are you doing this in the first place? Why are you going to college? How are you going to get there? And then how are you going to pay for it? Very clear, very simple, very easy. And a lot of people skip over that first question because they just think, I just got to get to school and I need to figure out a way to get a scholarship and I need to pay for it. But a lot of times that's what trips students up in the first place. So we sit down with our students and we say, why are you going to college? Is it because it's just the next thing that you need to do? Is it because you want a career that requires a degree? Is it because you want to expand your worldview? Is it because you want to continue learning? All of those questions, all of those answers are good answers. There's no wrong answer in that. But the idea is that students really need to identify why are you going to college? Not why am I going to college or why does everyone else think college is important, but why are you doing it? Because it's really important to identify kind of your value set, what are your constraints, what you need, and then be flexible about everything else. Because getting into a school and getting money to pay for your college career is about flexibility. We talked a little bit about the UC system and the Cal State system and public financing around the system here in California. But what we always tell our students is that flexibility is ultimately the key, because there are a lot of schools and a lot of small, private, liberal arts schools all around this country that have endowments and are waiting for a kid from California to help diversify their incoming class. But that requires some flexibility about why you are embarking in this endeavor in the next 4 years. And so we ask our students that all the time, and then we tell them it's really important that you start really looking into schools that have a no or low loan policy. So there are a lot of schools across the country that have committed to ensuring that they either have a no loan financial aid package or a very, very limited amount where financial aid packages are consisted of grants or work study programs that will help make college more affordable and ensure that students are not saddled with crippling student loan debt. And so there's a few handouts, if people are interested in that are out in the lobby, that have a list of some of these colleges that provide this sort of opportunity and resources. Colleges like Amherst and Colby College and Davidson and Swarthmore, Washington and Lee, Bowdoin College. Some of you might be thinking, I've never heard of those colleges before. And chances are the person next to you hasn't either. And that's fantastic, because what that means is that there are colleges that have endowments that are waiting, again, for a kid from California to take advantage of that opportunity and get an excellent college education. I have a student, Jonas, who grew up in Inglewood, who just finished his first year at Bowdoin College. Does anyone know where Bowdoin is? Where? Are you an alum? Okay. I was going to say, oh man, I just put my foot in my mouth. Bowdoin College, it's an amazing school. It actually, there's presidents that have gone to Bowdoin. Reed Hastings, who's the founder of Netflix, went to Bowdoin. It's a fantastic school. Jonas is going there on a full ride scholarship with a work study program, and he loves it. It's an amazing opportunity. But it required some flexibility for him to really think about, why am I going to school? If I want to expand my worldview, that's an excellent way to do it. So that is just a tip that if you are a parent trying to figure out how to get over that barrier of affordability, that is really, really, really important. Schools closer to home that have those sorts of policies, and of course these are private institutions, are the Claremont schools, Claremont McKenna, Pomona, excellent schools that also have no loan policies. Don't get fooled by the sticker. A lot of our students, they say, well, I want to go to a school where I can put a really cool bumper sticker on the back of my car.
It ain't worth it.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And a cautionary tale, I have a student who got a full ride scholarship to Denison University. Anyone want to know where Denison is? Ohio. Yeah, nice. In Ohio. Yeah, I like it. Got a full ride scholarship to Denison, but decided that he wanted to go to Loyola Marymount. I love Loyola. I got my master's in education and my law degree from Loyola, but he didn't get a financial aid package, or a very robust one, from LMU. And I can guarantee you that he's probably wishing today that he probably would have made a different choice now that he has a different sort of financial outlook. So those are just some of the things that are really, really important, and some of the barriers that a lot of my students face in terms of, figuring out how do you just start down that road of really identifying what's gonna work for you.
Other barriers? Anybody else?
I would say that in California we have a large number of first-generation students as we're trying to move more people into education, and financial aid is just confusing. It's like asking an 18-year-old to do taxes, but they also have to do their parents' taxes at the same time. Yeah. And sometimes we forget about things when they're not what we experience in our life. Like this year we saw a huge downturn in some of our financial aid applicants, and we were very concerned about it, and we started asking students, why aren't you applying? And what we found is that some students who were in mixed status families, where these are students who were born here, who have grown up here, and who have excelled in high school, were not applying for federal financial aid because they were worried it would be able to identify their parents as undocumented. Imagine being an 18-year-old kid and having to decide whether or not to apply for financial aid and risk your parents being deported. And so we saw it drop off. And that was something that we had to work through. So these types of confusion and making sure that students are aware what the process is, the safety of it, are all things that I think serve as barriers when students are making these types of decisions.
Earlier this year, when the stepped-up immigration was happening, enforcement was happening, the legislature, I remember we had a lot of behind-the-scenes discussions about what can we do to change programs right now, to change the requirements for programs right now to protect students. Besides college, the college applications, and I'm not sure where we ended up with that, even kids that are going to school with free and reduced lunches, were not taking the lunches because they didn't want to have to report that their parent, the same thing, they had this reporting requirement to be eligible for free lunches. What the teachers were reporting was these kids were sitting there hungry all day long. They were coming with no food, and they weren't getting the lunches because they were afraid to apply for them. So I think in that case, we were able to change the law so they didn't have to report the status of their parents. But looking at these programs one by one as they're brought to our attention has been really, really challenging in Sacramento. So on that note about undocumented students, how do you help them navigate college and financial aid process within the UC and Cal system and just across the state and with private colleges? What recommendations do you have for those students?
Well, I'll just say one thing, that when I was on the California Student Aid Commission, we created the first and only DREAM Act so that we have a separate application for AB 540 students. These are students that weren't born here, but were brought here when children and attended high school for 3 years, or even a grammar school for 3 years, and have a high school diploma or a GED. So we took every measure we could to make sure that information would not be shared outside of the CSAC staff themselves. So they should know that they can apply through that instead of the FAFSA form, the free federal application form. And I would refer you to a site, CSAC, C-S-A-C, California Student Aid Commission. We have a website there with a lot of information on there. And if you have children that are college going, or you yourselves are going to college, or your friends or neighbors, refer them to that early on, because deadlines for a lot of these scholarships and grants and the rest are early in the year before their school year starts. So if they're going to school in the fall, they need to be applying no later than early spring. So I would recommend CSAC. Just if you Google CSAC, you'll you'll find that website, and that would be helpful.
Great. Is financial aid available to undocumented students as well?
Yes, it is.
In California. In California. Yeah, it's, the California DREAM Act was just a game changer for the students that I served as a teacher. And it was, I remember in 2011 when that actually came into play, because we had a number of undocumented students that we were helping. And it's heartbreaking when you're working with a kid from 6th grade up until high school, and you're starting to believe that this might be the end of the road. So the California DREAM Act was amazing. AB 130 and 131, which allows students to apply for state aid here in California, is really important. But there's still incredible barriers. And you see it every day, because while I talk to a lot of my students and I tell them that let's try and reduce the need for you to take a loan, with undocumented students, you can't. You can't get a loan, except for if you can get some state aid from the state of California. So that becomes an absolute barrier. I had a student that in 2011 graduated from high school and got accepted to Berkeley, but because everything was so new, there was no way to get full financial aid, absolute full ride scholarship to Berkeley, just given the situation he was in. And it was an incredibly it was just an incredibly depressing situation as an educator to be in that situation. He luckily was able to get a complete full ride scholarship to Georgetown University, and he just graduated this year, which is really exciting.
That's a nice consolation.
Yeah. It was like, whew, oh my God, it was like last minute. But that trend, thankfully, is happening more and more. We are seeing more private universities across this country that are really stepping up and making sure and taking a stand and saying that if you are an undocumented student and you get accepted to this college, that we will do whatever we can to make sure that you get as much financial aid as you need. I'm happy to say that my alma mater, Duke University, actually just decided as of fall of 2017 they will be providing 100% financial aid for any undocumented student that gets admitted. But if you have, if you know of people or you want to assist with someone who's undocumented or who's a DACA student that is looking to apply to college, in the back there is a list of universities that are now accepting aid. I would recommend that any undocumented student fill out the FAFSA. It is safe. You cannot get federal aid, but it does allow you to be eligible for financial aid from individual institutions.
And for Cal Grants as well.
And for Cal Grants as well. So there's a big list in the back.
I would just say it's also about outreach. We have partners in the audience with us who do Cash for College, which are things that we do to go out to the high schools. For those who haven't done financial aid in a while, you actually can start applying for financial aid in October, the year before you start school. And in the front, as you walked in, you'll see something like this, but in color, which is from CSAC. And it talks about the different ways that people can apply for financial aid. But with undocumented students, it's really about talking through the fears and really letting them know that there's people like John who are at CSAC making sure that their information is protected.
I just want to highlight one thing that Sarah said, and I think, in a way, this is probably the most important thing that's being said tonight about loans. I have to confess that until I was on CSAC in 2011, I thought, like many people do think, that a loan was financial aid. Mm-hmm. No, it's not. It's a loan and it's debt. And it's like, if you go back in American history, you may recall there used to be debtor prisons. So now how are you going to pay off your debt when you're in prison? It didn't really work, so eventually they were erased. But loans are kind of like a debtor prison. Students are accumulating billions and actually trillions of dollars of loans, and they cannot pay them back in many cases. And it prevents them from buying homes, from getting married, from having kids. It really puts a damper on their lives, a really serious restraint, and it hurts the economy as well. It's just not part of the financial aid package, and I was glad to hear you say, don't get a loan. That would be the very last thing you want to do. And I think if you really search around and get help from someone like Sarah, you don't need to get a loan. And by the way, when you said...
It's not a guarantee.
Okay, and when you said go to the best school possible, well, guess what? You're sitting in one of the very best schools in California. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And if you want to go into career technical fields, come to LA Trade Tech College. So you don't have to go to Stanford or Harvard or Berkeley.
Except for French. I'm just kidding. Totally my fault. So what are the best strategies and tips for students and families when it comes to securing financial aid? You've given us some tools, but if I was going to say, what are the top 3 don't not do?
Oh, I'll give you a really big one. These for-profit schools, think of Corinthian that just went bankrupt. Those are not the best schools out there. And really, frankly, almost any community college has some of those programs. You have to search the college to find it. And those are good programs. Then the best, for example, the best fashion design program in Southern California is Trade Tech. But FITM is down 1 mile down the road, costs $30,000 a year. And when they finish 2 years at FITM, they come to Trade Tech to learn what they need to go into the field. So avoid at all costs for profits. Now, not to say that some of them don't do a decent job, but many of them overhype their ability to get good jobs. They're very expensive, and they don't always cover the material that students need to work. So that would be on the top of the list. That's number 1 for me.
This is I know a lot of families get hung up on this because it's just, you're not prepared for it, and it's terrible if you're living in Southern California. If you own a home, your financial aid forms will ask you about your home equity. And so that's not very good if you live in the Los Angeles area, because housing prices and the market is at its peak. Right. So it's worth it if you own a home and you're thinking about paying for college in the near future to start looking into schools that don't include home equity for financial aid, that don't look at home equity for financial aid. And there are a number. How can you tell? So there's actually, there's another handout in the back if that's something that interests you. There's a number of schools that do, and there's a number of schools that don't. And so schools like Bard College, Bucknell, Caltech, Hamilton, I think all public universities, I don't think utilize home equity.
I don't think they do.
But it's something to look into, because it's always a shocker for people when they realize that they don't qualify for financial aid and they don't understand why. So that would just be my 1 tip.
Well, I learn something new every day. I would just say it's all about making sure you apply. Oftentimes people think that they may not qualify for financial aid. Let them tell you no. Go through the process, see exactly what you qualify for, and make sure to follow all the steps. I would also say that there's a lot of scholarship opportunities out there, but it takes work. Mm-hmm. You need to think of financial aid as a job almost. Is it worth you spending 6 hours looking at different scholarship opportunities if you get a $3,000 scholarship? Yes. That's a lot per hour right there.
A good hourly rate.
That's a good hourly rate.
And how do you find that information?
I hate to keep
No, go.
There is another handout in the back.
I came well prepared.
There's definitely, always apply, and don't do it on your own. There's so many college access programs out there. With HYPE, we identify kids in middle school. We work with partner schools, so we're tied to the school site, different LUSD schools. But there are so many programs out there their mission is to help students get into college. And so there's a number of those programs that are listed, and this is just a start. If you are interested in finding a way to get into college and make it affordable for you, programs like the Posse Foundation, which you apply for at the end of your junior year, and they group you together with a cohort of students, and then they have partners with various grade schools across the country, and you get a full ride scholarship and all of this mentorship and this support along the way. Programs like South Central Scholars that you can apply for your senior year of high school. There are programs that are tied to individual universities. Again, if you are flexible, if you are committed to getting into a great school and not paying the amount of money that you think you're going to need to pay, looking into those sorts of programs. The Northeastern Torch Scholars Program is an amazing program. So there are so many of these different programs, but it takes work and it takes some planning. And so it's something that should be done your junior year of high school, or if you have a child that's, don't do it your senior year. It's too late by that time for a lot of these programs.
And what about the small scholarships? Like today, I was at an event where the La Crescenta Chamber of Commerce gave out 3 small, but it's significant, $1,000 each or something, scholarships to 3 local students. How do you find out about those sort of small service club scholarships, high school scholarships? Are there listings, or do people just have to think about things they've heard of?
There's a lot of listings, and thankfully, online Google searches makes it a lot easier than it used to be. And there's definitely, I remember people telling me this when I was applying to school. There's so many scholarships, some of those small ones that go unclaimed because no one applies for them. And so it really is worth your time for some of those small scholarships. But I will say, do not think that you are going to pay for college by accumulating a bunch of small scholarships. One of the things, just a cautionary tale, is that we do have students that do that. And if you are low income and you have no other method of paying, many of those scholarships do not continue for the 4 years that you're there. So if that is a method that you really want to invest time in, make sure that you're looking for scholarships that have that will be throughout the course of your college career, so that you're not left out to dry your sophomore year of college and have to come back home.
I would also say check the website for the institution that you're going to be going to, because oftentimes they list the scholarships as well. John mentioned some of the scholarships through the foundation at LA Trade Tech, in case you couldn't tell how much pride he has in what he does.
I like to give money away.
He does.
For students.
His faculty union actually gives scholarships and internships away as well. Yeah. And usually on the school websites, you can find a listing of all of these different opportunities.
And are there things that students can do early on when they're in high school, or that parents can do with their students that make them more attractive to those who give scholarships? I mean, I see kids today do so many service hours and they get involved. So if you're really someone that's going to need a lot of scholarship money, is there or your child will, is there some should you force them to go into ROTC? Should they join the Glee Club? I mean, what would be your perfect background? Or is it just be the valedictorian, get the straight A's? How do you prepare your child for competing against other students for those scholarships?
So, when I was applying, back in my day, when I was applying for schools, I remember it was you need to be the valedictorian, you need to play 3 sports, you need to be in every club, and you need to just be a jack of all trades. That's not necessarily the case anymore, because everybody, there's so many students out there that get great grades and play sports and are in every club. So I think really having a passion is what we find that really sets our students apart, so that they can talk about something that is really just, something that is important to them and something that they've invested time in. And we really try and promote that, rather than this sort of trying to spread yourself very thin. But the other thing I will say is, if you're interested in a school, schools like to know that you want to go there. Early fly-in programs, applying early decision, making it very, very clear that you are invested in this school and you want to go there is a very, very important strategy.
I think we work less with the students on the front end, but we see them on the back end. And I know in reading scholarship applications, I can say that passion is really important. It's very easy to tell when somebody's being genuine and when they're writing a really good essay. There's a difference. And you're always going to give it to the passion every time, because that student's real. So sometimes if you want to know what you can do early, you need to find that passion. Because if you're writing just because you want a scholarship, because you're going to college, because that's what you do, it does come across.
Well, and I would add one thing, and our daughters are in their 20s now, and we took them around, we toured them around to some of the schools they wanted to apply to. I would do that really early. A colleague of mine started when her daughter was, I think, a sophomore, and I was kind of curious, well, why are you starting so early? Because you can visit more colleges, for one thing, and secondly, it kind of sinks in, and they get to talk to friends and relatives and neighbors and everybody. Get them out there, make those tours, visit those colleges, and you just don't know what it's really like until you're there. Mm-hmm. And our youngest, she's sorry that we visited Santa Cruz. And anybody been to University of California, Santa Cruz?
Go bananas.
Boy, I'll tell you, that's a dream. She almost chose that. Instead, she chose CU instead of UC. That's Colorado University in Boulder. And 1 year later, she dropped out and said, you know, I don't want to be here anymore. And I thought, well, gee, we did the right thing. We visited several colleges. She picked her choice, and it turned out to be not what she expected it to be. But you do need to do that. You really need to invest the time and energy to make visits to the schools that you're considering for your children.
If I could go to Santa Cruz, I'd go back to school, I think.
Yeah.
Me too. Beautiful.
Are there any state programs to help alleviate students and families who've already graduated who now have crushing financial aid debt?
Well, there's definitely some federal programs, but we'll see if they still exist at the end of the year. So for those people who work in public sector, working with populations like the ones we're talking about, there are some loan forgiveness programs currently in place if you can show that you've paid on your loan for 10 years.
Great. My mother got a nursing degree, and it was paid for by the VA in exchange for her to work there. Should students who are looking at technical educations like that look at programs like that, where if you promise to work for a certain employer, you can get your education paid for?
I think that's a great idea, sure. And I think there should be more of that, too. Mm-hmm. That's a form of financial aid that we should promote.
And coming from a social work program, that's very common across the state. There's programs where if people go into a master's program for social work and agree to work for DCFS or with actually one of the most underserved population right now, geriatrics, they can sometimes have half their loans paid off if they agree to work for 2 years, which is not a big commitment. Yeah. And so I agree with John. Those are great programs, and they're few and far between, and it would be great if we could see more of those.
Let me move to a couple of audience questions. This one, I'm not sure who would answer it. The question is, would it be possible for a city council to coordinate with local businesses and organizations to offer more scholarships? Private groups are a great source of funding, but are not always consistent in their scholarship programs year after year. Promoting these efforts can really go a long way towards making college more affordable. So I guess the question really is it possible for government intervention to help coordinate private groups and nonprofits, scholarship efforts? Have you heard of anything like that?
Absolutely. Well, first, if you want to see something that was very big, you can look at San Francisco that passed a tax ordinance that would actually make community college free. So that's one example of local governments acting to do that. But also a shameless plug for the audience again, we work with a group called the LA Compact, which is run through the LA Chamber of Commerce. And it is a group of city officials, business partners, and educators, and they do give out a lot of scholarships to students and try to raise money and awareness for financial aid.
That's terrific. So maybe an idea for GCC and the Glendale Community College or Burbank Community College to work on together. Another question from the audience. Oftentimes there are scholarships available to students, but they're unable to find or access them. Do you have any specific suggestions for any changes to resolve this issue? Like scholarship workshops maybe that the colleges themselves can offer, in which students can receive guidance on how to obtain scholarships, or having coaches such as teachers they suggest to do that. Are you aware of any programs like that?
There are various nonprofits, but I think it really highlights the need in public education. Obviously we don't. This audience doesn't need to be reminded that we are struggling to provide quality K through 12 education across the state, especially serving students with special needs or low-income students. And one of the things that is most striking to me as a former LAUSD teacher is the lack of college guidance in LAUSD high schools. And I see it throughout the work that I do with HYPE. Many of our students, we work with them in middle school and we get them scholarships to independent high schools across Los Angeles, schools like Harvard Westlake and Crossroads and Poly and private schools on the East Coast, and people will ask about that sometimes and will say, it's really not about the education. I mean, the education's good. It's a great education at some of those schools, but what it's really about is the college guidance counselor. Yep. And when you have a college guidance counselor that is responsible for 10 kids instead of 400, it makes absolutely a difference. And so that is something that is just, it strikes a chord with me, because I think that is one of the biggest reasons why students don't have access to some of these opportunities in public high schools, is because we do not have the capacity to serve them the way we want to. So trying to figure out a way to find funding to really support that part of the public school system is really, really necessary.
And I know that you've all brought some material, but for people who might be watching this at home, we are going to be broadcasting this on YouTube and putting it on our website. What are some of the best places to find information about scholarships and financial aid? Are there particular websites people should look at?
Well, in addition to CSAC, TICAS, T-I-C-A-S, is the Institute for College Access and Success. They have quite a lot of material on their website that's really excellent. Research that's been done, suggestions on how to navigate financial aid, and the rest. So that's a great one. TICAS. You need the initials and it'll pop up. It's the Institute for College Access and Success. So those are the two main ones that I know of.
Great. Here's a really great question we just got. The existing financial aid system is woefully, and I'm sorry I can't read the word, it says especially Cal Grant. It prioritizes recent high school graduates with entitlement grants and makes older adults compete for very few awards at a time when many students in the population is really changing and trending older and non-traditional. What can we do to push for changes that modernize the system and reflect the changing student population?
Well, that's a great question, and it's half true. First of all, I think the entitlement grants are not too many, they're too few as well. But most of the money is for entitlements for high school grads. And whoever wrote the question, you're absolutely right. The average age in our community colleges is in the high 20s or 30s, and there's very little financial aid from CSAC for older students. Cal Grant B is a great example. Now, I think you mentioned earlier that the Cal Grants are going to go up a bit, but when I was on the commission, we would get literally 180,000 valid applications of students who should get financial aid for the Cal Grant B, the older students, okay? And we gave out 20,000 or so. Now I think and one of the things that I did when I was on the commission, among with my other commissioners, is push for the legislature to increase the number of Cal Grant Bs that we give and the amount, raising it from $1,500 to $3,000 or $4,000. And really, I think that's where we need to do a lot more work to increase the Cal Grant B for older students. But don't take it out of the entitlement grants for high school grads.
Great. So here's the billion-dollar question. From my perspective, for those of you who would like to see free college up here, how do we pay for it? What would you do? What would you cut? What would you change to be able to afford that?
Well, I've said it earlier in a different way. I'll say it now again and more directly. I think it's the obligation of the state of California to make college free again. It is a good investment. It is a public good, and there's nothing that I'd cut. When you look at the budget, you need to increase the budget for education across the board, I think. And you have to figure out where you find that revenue. I don't think the way we've done it recently is the best way to do it. Prop 30 and Prop 55, if you follow the initiatives that we voted that raises the tax on the wealthy, that's fair, I think. But the problem with that is the more you tax the wealthy and the less you have a tax base that goes all the way across, the more of this roller coaster effect that you get. So, by the way, Judy Chu, Congresswoman Judy Chu is a former colleague of mine. She worked at first City College and then East LA. And when she was on the Board of Equalization, we were flying back from Sacramento one time, and she said, "John, I've got a solution to the problem on taxes. Let's broaden sales tax to include services and not goods. We could actually lower the rate and raise more money, and would be more stable than raising income taxes for the wealthy." So I think it's going to take a lot of work to figure out how we have a fair system of taxes, but adequate taxes to fund education better. I don't know what we could cut.
You know,
Now we just, oh, sorry.
I would say that's an excellent question, but I want to bring up specifically locally in our area, we have this stretch that we call the biotech corridor, and it goes from about Pasadena all the way to USC. And the systems of education have been working to try to invest heavily in this because we have some of the best R&D in the world. And the minute they develop their products, they leave. And the reason they leave is because they do not have the workforce to be able to build what they designed here. So they invest here, they do their research here, and when they create a product where they can actually have a sustainable workforce, because we do not have the employees, they leave. And some of these employees are baccalaureate level, some are master's level, and some are short-term career technical level. And if we invest in these type of free education, we may actually stimulate the economy to the point where it does not cost.
Okay. We have a wireless mic. We can just take a few questions if people didn't have time to write them down. Happy to hand the mic over to you if you just raise your hand. And I think we have another question coming up. Great. I'll just read this. What do you feel the impact will be on college affordability in light of the recent UC audit? Good question. It brought up money questions about the practices of UC admins and fundamentally about the constitutional autonomy of the UC system. That's a great question.
I'm going to let John handle this one.
Well, okay, now I'm going to put on my faculty hat. I don't think you can find a single institution in higher education that spends the right amount of money on administration. I think they're all bloated, okay? And I don't think that UC should continue spending money. When I was up there, we had a commission meeting up there where we went to one of those new facilities that they built for students to go. It's like not a gym, but it's an all-encompassed, whatever they called it, I don't recall. But why are you spending money on that? Buildings and you know, high-tone facilities like that. Put the money in classrooms, because the increase in tuition over the years, the last 10 or 20 years, it has not gone into more classes, more student services, and more faculty. It has gone into overhead. So I don't know how you do that, because, you know, even at Trade Tech, we look at the deans that we have and we need them. And I couldn't, you know, if I was appointed to cut something out, I'm not sure just exactly what it would be. Maybe the way we're organized just isn't working right. I don't know. Now, I will say this. In K-12, look at the charter movement. So charters, they break away from the overhead of the big district, LAUSD. They seem to function fairly well in terms of overhead, and they're not paying their share of the cost of the district. So let's look at that. Let's look at some other models, because I'm not sure that the way we're doing it now, as we've done it for so many years, is really efficient. It's not. So it needs to, and the UC system is probably one of the worst. It's a great system. I think it's one of the best in the world, but there is a lot of money spent at the top in overhead that I think could be put into classrooms and services for students.
Great. Okay, we have a question. Yep. Yep.
Should I stand up?
Just talk.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a question for funding. All the funding comes from taxing, and when you increase taxes on the wealthy and I don't know how everything of this works, but essentially you generate more revenue. Is it possible, and I don't know if this is being done or it's been looked into, is there any other way of generating revenue for any program, not just higher education, that is not through taxing?
Well, let me just step aside and just talk about taxes for a minute. 25 or 30 years ago, 20% of all the revenue taken into the general fund in California was from corporations. Now it's 10%. So stop and think. We have an $185 or so billion budget, California does. 10% of that would be $18 billion. Add another $18 billion if corporations simply paid the ratio of taxes that they did 25 or 30 years ago. $18 billion, you could have, there would be no tuition at UC, CSU, community colleges. That would cost about $3 billion, $2 or $3 billion. And then you have another $15 billion for healthcare or other services, fixing the roads, the potholes, or whatever. So I don't know how you would provide the things that we want and need outside of revolutionary ideas, like the idea that is kind of floating around, but it was kind of put to sleep for a moment, about a different way of handling health care. You know, if we eliminated insurance companies and just did it directly like Medicare for everybody, that would probably save God knows how much money, enough to cover costs. So that would be a different way of organizing how we do an entire major industry, and healthcare is a major industry. But I think that we just have to figure out who pays taxes and how they pay them. By the way, back to Prop 13. You know, we all agreed. I mean, I agreed too in 1978 that we didn't want to, you know, push Granny out of her house by paying too high property taxes. But the corporations also got that benefit as well. And so today they don't pay property taxes on the value of their property. If we change that alone, that would be another $6 or $8 billion, and they can certainly afford it. So I think we have to relook at how we do it and try to improve the way we come up with revenue.
And John, let me speak to this maybe from a little bit of a more micro perspective. There are ways that you can generate money to fund specific programs. Oftentimes you can do things that are entrepreneurial, or you can do things where you partner with businesses to have investment in different programs. But this type of funding is usually few and far between, and it becomes very difficult to be sustainable. I think if you look at other countries as models, you see that a lot more than we see it here in the United States. If you look at Germany as an example, and the way that they build their career technical programs, which are highly sought after and highly valued, businesses actually invest in the students and they invest in the education. They bring the students to the college, they pay for the students to go to the college, and they pay for the programs because they want the workers. Here we have a different model where the government plays the in-between. They play the middleman to make sure that the employers have the skilled workforce that they need.
You know, that's a good example. And let me just add one thing. My mom was a nurse, and she went to nursing school in Tennessee in the 1940s. And it wasn't paid by public dollars. The hospitals ran their training programs themselves then. Somewhere along the line, I don't know just how this happened, you know, it got shifted to community colleges and public institutions to pay for training nurses. Why wouldn't the healthcare industry pay for that? They're the ones who use them and hire them. So we could make that shift as well.
I have an interest in the trade schools. That I'm a college graduate and I believe in that process, but not everyone is interested academically. And so what can we do as a society to encourage more of the, whether you're going to be an auto mechanic or a nurse or whatever, what can we do about that to create a greater opportunity for those people?
John, can I start real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say we have to beat down the stigma. A lot of people will talk about career technical education as being valued, but if I ask you, do you want your children to go to a career technical program, you usually say no. And that's what we need to combat, because these are programs that breed excellence beyond what you could ever imagine. At East Los Angeles College, there's an auto tech program that every year competes in a marathon where they build a car that is completely self-propelled, no fuel, and they beat major universities standing still. And these are auto tech students. These are career technical students. And we need to look at the value of career technical education and not just the bumper stickers that we talked about later. Yeah. And I think that that is the first thing that we really need to do to make sure that career technical is valued, is to make sure that people realize that it is a college education and it is as equivalent to what we see on more of the liberal arts side.
I couldn't, you know, and I think it's definitely a paradigm shift that needs to be had throughout the realm of education. As a former middle school teacher, you know, we have kind of entered into this era where we have a very kind of sort of blunt sort of approach to how we talk to students about post-secondary options, and in the past decade, it has been beating into people that you will go to college without getting a little bit more sophisticated about analyzing the market, where there is need, and how you relate that to your students at a very young age. It's not you need to go to college. It's you need to acquire the skills that are going to help you get the types of jobs that you want and the types of jobs that our economy needs. That's right. And right now, you know, when you talk to folks, You know, when you talk to building trades, when you talk to people that really need high-skilled trades workers, they'll tell you that there's just not enough.
There's not enough.
And the same goes with the tech industry as well. So I think that also, the onus is also on educators to really be in tune with the workforce needs that we have, because I think the message gets mixed up in the classroom.
We once reached out to a high school to offer community college classes as an outreach there, and they said, no thank you, all of our kids are going to Ivy Leagues. I said, really? I'd love to see that data.
Okay, this is going to be our last question.
I'm kind of following up on his question. I attended Glendale Community College after my husband was diagnosed with dementia, and I had worked in the entertainment field before that, but I had to step away from that work to help him because he was not taking his medication and he was getting lost and a number of different things. I was told about a job in Pasadena Unified School District working in early childhood education, just a part-time job, which was good for the situation I was in, because what it introduced me to was the delight and excitement of working in those early years. And what I got from Glendale Community College was a really rich program. My question is, how do we make sure those kind of programs continue, but how do you get to the next, and make sure that you get to the next stage, which would be past the AA degree and going on, because there's so much going on in the early childhood field as far as what kind of qualifications do you need?
Well, if this is the last question, then I'm going to end on a really, really positive note, okay? So first of all, let me tell you, in 1978, when I went to Trade Tech was known nationally for its high-quality programs and technical areas. As the years went by, as you mentioned, the stigma, somewhere along the line, everybody had to go to college, and, you know, being a plumber, being a carpenter, being an electrician, you don't want to do those things. You know what, I have to tell you, at Trade Tech, I see those students and those faculty. Those people love what they're doing. Sheet metal workers, they create things. Our former board president, who was actually a teacher in my program before he got on our board, did a film that I don't know how it's going to be released and how it's going to be out there, but it's about the building of the Wilshire Grand. Interviews and showing exactly how that building is put together. My God, that was the most exciting movie I've seen in a long time. And interviews with the rank and file, not the leaders of the unions or the big wigs. I don't think the mayor's in the movie either, but just the workers. And when you see what they do, I think we need to get more of that kind of information out there. There are going to be a lot of young people who recognize the value of working with your hands and creating things. So I think we just have to, by the way, but look at the legislature these days. In the last couple of years, funding for pathways, the former pro tem led that charge, and now there's additional money coming down for pathways and CTE programs. We have funding we haven't seen in a long time targeted for this kind of occupation, this kind of training for these occupations. So I think we're in a good place. We're there in Germany, though. In Germany, it's a source of pride to be tracked into one of those programs. For us, it was for a moment there. You don't want to be in those programs. You want to go to the Ivy League. No, everybody doesn't want to go to Ivy League. And now I'll tell you something that you'll only find out by someone like me telling you. Most of the graduates from Trade Tech don't have an associate degree. Mm-hmm. Most of them have a certificate of completion. So I don't know about their English and I know about their math, but you can't be an automotive mechanic today without math, period. Or a carpenter or a plumber because of the math that's in those fields now. So I think we're at a good place now.
Well, and speaking of the Wilshire Grand, that was 9,000 highly qualified trades jobs that went into that building.
Right.
And that's extremely impressive to know that a project like that generated so much economic development in the city of Los Angeles, but they struggled to meet their local hire requirement. In fact, I don't think they did meet their local hire requirement because they couldn't find enough highly skilled trades workers within the local area to really meet that. So that just goes to show why Trade Tech is so important.
On that note, they were actually taking students out of Trade Tech's program before they could even complete.
And we don't like that.
We don't like that. We want them to complete
like to
so
get
that
them
they. But I do want to also thank the legislature, though, because to answer the question specifically about making sure that career technical programs can also go on to the next level if people want to proceed, the legislature passed a bill that allowed us to create transfer degrees, which would guarantee people entry into the CSU system if they passed a certain set of classes. And what's amazing about this, it's the first time we've ever done this. It's statewide curriculum. It can be transferred across the entire state. It's a 60-unit maximum, so no wasted units. And when you transfer to the CSU, it guarantees you can get out in another 60 units. You're guaranteed that junior status. And the work of the legislature to really make sure that that was possible across both sectors has been amazing, and the number of degrees we have conferred in that associate degree of transfer category has doubled every single year.
Great. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, being a great audience, Dr. Vyar and Glendale Community College for hosting us. And the panel, are they amazing? Let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you so much for your passion for education. Thank you.